Hi, I'm Liz Holpin from Pinhole Quilting, and today we're going to work on this Pro Stitch Lite on a Moxie, and I'm going to do a series of videos that take you through how you can do some individual quilt designs on your quilt. So first of all, we need to turn it on. At the plug, we turn it on the plug, and then we turn on the carriage, like so. Once that's engaged, I then turn on the machine, the Moxie machine itself. I'll turn those lights down a little. And then when that's on, we can turn on the tablet. The tablet is a nice chewy tablet, it's a Windows-based system. And when it starts up automatically into the software. It's got a track that runs on the frame. And on this particular one, we've got a Loft Frame, which is set up at 6 foot. Which is a custom thing that we've done so that we can get it onto the shows, So I'm just going to turn the lights down. On the Moxie, your handlebar controls control everything to do with the stitch length of the machine, whether you end up with the needle down or up, and everything. So we just go into the menu by pressing minus and plus together. And once we've gone into that, starting up. There we go. While it's connecting to the machine, you can't use the handlebar controls. I've just discovered, I didn't actually know that. You can't use the handlebar controls when you're starting the machine up with Pro Stitcher. It's obviously talking to it. Okay, to select an option, I use needle up, needle down, and then I'm just going to turn these lights off, because it's not so good for the camera. Stitches per inch, I'm going to change it to 11 stitches per inch. I'm going to be using a glide thread, and I'll show you how we thread that up as well, and go through some of the selection choices we have with the thread. It's an interesting thing, isn't it? You know, what thread do you use? Well, we're using glide, and I'll predominantly use white. I'll show you the design of the quilt in a moment. The Pro Stitch Lite screen, it's a good size screen, and I'm going to pick individual designs. These will be from the default Pro Stitcher library, and I'll show you the kind of things that we can do. And we select a design, we select the area that we want to do it in, and then we stitch it out basically. So first of all, I'm going to cover loading. So I've got my backing fabric. It's always going to be bigger than the top fabric, and you put it on over the frame with the backing facing towards the floor. So I have this set up in what's called the low position, and in the low position it basically means that I've got the fabric for the backing is on the second rail in, and the fabric for the top is on the first rail in. The wadding goes between the two. So I'll have my straight edge, which is going to be the bottom of my backing fabric, and I'll take the middle of that and put it on the center marking. So I'll have marked the center of my backing fabric, and I line it up with the center of the cloth leader. And I'm just using the straightforward loading method of using the long arm pins, which are actually supplied with the frame. And that's the nice thing about the Handi Quilter machines, is that you are really able to get going very, very quickly with these machines, because everything's included. Now, when we pin it, I pin it in about 3/8 to a 1/2 inch in on the backing fabric, and I just do a straight line. You could mark it if you wished. It doesn't make a huge amount of difference, but I mean, you don't want it wonky. You absolutely don't want it wonky. So I'm going to do this. I keep going, and basically head to tail, with a very small gap in between will give you a really good result. And I keep doing that all the way along. These pins are actually millimeter pins. They're really strong, so you don't end up with too many bent pins. I just picked up a bent pin. I've obviously used that a little bit too many times. This is going to be one of those videos where, in order to illustrate my point, I will make the mistake first and then show you how I correct it. I think that is going to be one of those, this is going to be one of those times. The end one, I come back with like a double bite so that there isn't a sharp end poking at me. Now what I've done is I've done all of the pins from the centre out going to the left, heading in that direction, and on this direction I'm going to go and have them facing in the other direction, so pointing to the right this time. And the reason for that being that I normally use my pin cushion on my arm, and I've put it down somewhere, so I'm using this metallic magnetic pin cushion, which is really good. It's they're from when people do motor repairs, you know, vehicle repairs. You can probably find them on different websites, or maybe one popular website that seems to stock everything, and they're really good for putting onto the rails. So either use you know, a wrist pin cushion for easy access of these, or one of those metallic ones. It's pretty useful. So I just keep going like this. Now some people use other methods of attaching their quilt to the quilt frame, and there are times when that might be useful. For example, if you're quilting for other people but you want to do one of your own quilts, some people use a zip system. The benefit of a zip system, which is where you've got half of the zip attached to the cloth leader and half the zip attached to the fabric itself, and sometimes putting like a ribbon onto the zip first and then sewing that zip ribbon onto your quilt preserves the longevity of the zip. And they're thick zips. They're like you might get on a canvas tent or something, and you can get them online. The benefit of that is that once you've sewn your fabric onto the zip, there's a bit of a wonky pin there, but it actually won't make that much difference. Once you've sewn it on and it's all attached and you've layered it up and perhaps started quilting, when you unzip it and then rezip it when you're ready to restart, it's going to be lined up, which is pretty important, because aligning your quilt that's partially completed is not easy. The other way you can do it, there are things called red snappers, which are okay, but personally I don't find them very useful, very easy to use, and that's just because I find pushing them on really difficult. Right, now we've got that pinned, I'm just going to roll this forward. Oh. And smooth it as we go. Just smoothing it from the inside to the outside. And what you're trying to do is just keep it nice and level. Ordinarily I would have cut that selvage off, but actually this was a fabric that was given to me and I didn't realise the selvage was on it until I was ironing it. Oh, I haven't really got the time to take that selvage off. I'm just going to get that on the machine, get that on the frame. It's very long. I think it's longer than you need, which is good. You don't want it shorter. There are techniques, and they are shown on the Handi Quilter website, for how you can add in an extra bit of backing fabric. But you don't really want to have to be doing that. This is the take-up rail, and the take-up rail, I'm going to attach this to the take-up rail. Now, have I got all of the cloth leaders absolutely lined up? You can just double check as you're pinning and make sure that it doesn't look like it's out of whack. So I just make sure it doesn't look like it's sort of angled. That will help you. And the only reason I've done having to do that is because I just replaced the cloth leaders because I had some sample fabric on here. You probably won't have to do that. You'll have marked your cloth leaders and they will form the centre of the rails. And in most cases, like if you've got a 12-foot studio frame, or if you've got a 10-foot or an 8-foot, you're going to just keep those cloth leaders on there all the time. But because we're doing demos and things, I'm frequently swapping them around, so hence, I don't know for sure, it looks okay. It's lined up. It looks like it should be okay. These cloth leaders look like they are on the rails correctly. I think I did them square, straight. This one at the front is shorter, so I do need to just make sure I put that in the centre. So when I put my quilt on, it's not misaligned. But visually you can do that pretty easily anyway. Yes, going back to the loading methods. So one of the other things is there's some magnets that you can get. So there's a few different ways, and also some people decide not to pin their quilt top onto this front cloth leader, and it's called floating, and it basically means that you, as you progress, you just lay it on. As you roll it up, you make sure that the next section is nice and flat. But if you're doing computerized quilting, that's not always a good idea if you're doing edge to edge, because it's really important it's nice and square. And if you just float, that can be okay, and particularly if you're going to do a blocking treatment at the end, which is where you square it up, having sort of got it done, and then pinned it square. But if you're not doing that, you'll probably want to, and I suggest for beginners, until you feel confident, that you just pin it to the front one. I'm going to go around the back because I want to show you how we can pin at the back here. So because I'm going from this side to that side, it's easier and less hard on my back to stretch as well, to come around to the back of the frame if you have the space and pin it, as long as it's the same distance from the edge, and these edges are going right sides together effectively. I have seen it where some people try and sort of put it underneath, and that's just really hard work. You don't want to be doing that. So right side to right side, all the way along. And so we go on. And once we've done our backing, I'm going to have a look and choose the thread for the top. And then I'll go on to video number 2 of loading the quilt top. Just talking through this process, one of the things that some people like to do is load the quilt the day before they do their quilting. I like to do that. And the benefit of that is that you've kind of done all of the sorting out, the technical sort of aspects of it. You've picked your thread, and the following day you're all ready for your creative process, which is kind of nice. And the point of me doing this video in real time is partly to show you that it doesn't take that long to load a quilt, even if you're pinning it. There we go, let's just take that up. Now this is almost like a little table now I've got. There we go. Put the stoppers on, put the stoppers on there, and just check it all looks good. Now if you've got, like this has here, it's a little bit floppy, it could be that my last pin is just not, the last pin isn't quite as good. Or it could be that your fabric wasn't cut square, that's another possibility. And that actually is what it looks like. So did you see that? So what it is this end piece here is not as tight as I would like it. And it's just because that final cut there, I really should have squared this fabric up. So here we go. This is where I demonstrate what not to do. And then you can learn from mistakes. So what you don't want to do is just assume that when someone gives you a piece of fabric that it's actually square. That'd be really silly, wouldn't it? You just need to get that fabric. I did actually look at it and didn't think that it was a problem. Oh well. All I need to do is just take that slack out. I can actually see it's cut up like this. The other way of dealing with it, and I'm going to show you this as a little tip, is to put a piece of wadding in here. And that will get rid of the problem too. And once you're started, you're fine. You just don't want to have So much slack here. So a piece of wadding is what you need. And I have wadding here, partly for this purpose, but also to clean the wheels. Any scrap bits of wadding don't get wasted, obviously. So what you can do is you can actually put it underneath here, just stick it in there, and it just tightens it, so that when you're quilting that first section, it'll hold it up. Okay, so we've done that. Now let's have a look at our top, quilt top. So this is the quilt top. It's made up of a couple of borders. There's this outer border, an inner border with the blue flying geese. Then we've got some panels, some are pre-printed, but we could do some interesting things in there. And so I'm going to quilt this like a custom quilt, really. And I think the benefit of that is that very often when I'm demoing stuff, it's edge to edge. It's, you know, how people get started. But let's use this as a sample and just have a bit of fun with it. And we'll set it up. White thread I would suggest for these outer borders, and it looks like some blue is going to be needed here. Okay, so I'll work my way down. I'll probably stabilize most of it first, and the benefit of that is that I can then, once I've stabilized it and effectively basted the whole thing as one, number one, I could take it off if I needed to, because it will just be on 2 rails and be easier to put back on rather than on 3, which is really difficult. And the other benefit is that I can actually pick which parts of the quilt I do at a time. So I might have the same thread being used here as further down. I don't have to change my thread, I can just work my way down the quilt. So we have a 4-rail system here. This is the loft frame. So we've got our take-up rail there, that's where our finished quilt goes. This is an idler or lazy bar, or Pete calls it, I think, dead bar. And that just basically means that between here and here is always flat. Some systems have a 3-rail system. You don't want a 3-rail system because you'll continue to be altering the height of it, particularly if you want to go backwards and forwards like I'll be demonstrating here. So always buy a 4-rail system. And it's got our backing there and our quilt top there. Okay, I'm going to go.